Before we dig into the intellectual aspects of all that's going on, I do want to check in with how people feel, and just sort of touch on that. And, you know, it's a heavy time. And I know I feel kind of the weight of the world on me, dealing with all the news every day seems very overwhelming. And yet I have had a huge outlet for that and a lift of exhilaration and excitement and being part of the protests every day. And especially here in Brooklyn, there's an air of danger in that we don't know when the cops may or may not start to attack us. But shutting down streets, being around thousands of like-minded people who are angry, who are dreaming of a better future, who want to stand up to the system, even when a curfew is imposed, thousands of people continuing to march. I have found that thrilling and lifting, and it has changed my mood. And I've been like looking forward to the moment I could run out and be part of the protest for a couple of hours. I wonder how other people are feeling based on everything that's going on.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll pick it up. Honestly, Toure, it depends on the moment you ask. Because I've run through a range of emotions the past week or so, and I think a lot of it, man, was my inherent my first response to the response, and we can certainly get into how it felt to see the video and here we go again. But my first response to the response, honestly, was, where was this energy 4 years ago? Where was this energy 40 years ago? Like, where has this been? Like, we've been trying to tell you and you wouldn't believe us, and now you're out in full force. And so because of that initial response, I gotta be honest, like, I've been, history's kind of like conditioned me to be skeptical and pessimistic about whether or not this is actually the moment, whether or not this is actually like real changes on the horizon. But then, like, I'm watching it today go global, and I'm watching these protests like show no sign of slowing down. And I'm saying to myself, wait a second, let me go ahead and like let go of the past, which I'm generally bad at doing, for a second, only for the purposes of enjoying this moment that we all agree feels so different and it looks so different. And I'm like, let me enjoy this moment, because maybe, just maybe, we might be seeing the beginnings of the end of a system that we never thought we'd see end. Just as I never thought I'd see a Black president until I saw one. Like, could America actually be ready? And maybe I'm naive and I'm falling for the banana in the tailpipe, even like going down this road, because I'm conditioned not to trust white folks. I'm conditioned not to trust their motivations. But it's like, could America actually be ready to not just acknowledge its original sin, but repent from its original sin, which means to change your mind? Could a paradigm shift actually be taking place?
Bundles of bananas. Bundles of bananas.
Hey man, I'm trying
and to tons of tailpipes.
I'm trying to like be hopeful, because the alternative is for it to be as overwhelming as Toure talked about. Which
but I do think I think that there's a middle ground there, right? So simultaneously, we saw Ferguson elect a Black woman mayor yesterday. We saw a admitted racist not get reelected by Republicans. So those are indicators of some level of shift. And at least in Ferguson, that is a reflection of work that's been done over the last 4 years.
Yes.
So I don't think that it's either this kind of utopia of a toppling system, almost like an Arab summer in the United States that just isn't existing.
Oh wait, no, just to be clear, Jeff, real quick, just to be clear. That's why I said the beginnings of something, which the beginning is an acknowledgement. And that's what I mean. Yeah,
I do think it's the beginning of something. I don't think it's the beginning of the end of white supremacy. I I think that it's the beginning of us making some decisions. And those decisions will determine what that trajectory looks like. So will we do the same shit and be comfortable with focusing on the symptomatic case versus the systemic issue?
Yeah.
And so will we celebrate the indictment and potential conviction of 4 officers, or will we say, no. Thank you for doing what you were supposed to do.
Doing the bare minimum.
But there's several issues at play here, which is I don't ever want to see a police officer that is fired from a police department for excessive force hired in another police department.
Exactly.
You can steal $100 out of a tray at a bank and never work at a bank again.
Never again.
Kill somebody in the line of duty, not go to jail, and get hired by another police department a year later. And so there is and I'm sure we all will mention over the course of this conversation the myriad of policy recommendations and issues that will determine whether we're looking at this through the lens of a single case, or whether we're tired of the entire reality that police were never created to protect and serve, and they were only created to control and monitor. And once we understand that, then perhaps we can be in a place where we have a greater sense of focus. But I think there's some real opportunities here for some institutional changes.
Right. Well, that's all I'm saying.
Our institutional stuff.
And Jeff, you're just talking about police brutality.
Right.
Go ahead, Jason. But we're just talking about one issue.
No,
so much
exactly.
Of this,
exactly.
So much of this in Baltimore, I always use this example to start. So much of this is an issue not just of laws, but also of just political will. Just political will, because some of the laws are already there. It's the way in which the politicians that we sometimes allow, sometimes our own community, certainly the larger white community. I always look, when I look at these spate of cases, I think about not just police officers, but all public service employees, and the way in which cops seem to get this special dispensation. I was talking about this with Freddie Gray. They take a guy on a rough ride, he ends up dead. If you were a public school teacher and took 20 kids on a field trip and came back with 17, you're going to jail. Like there's no story about it was a rough ride on the bus. Right.
It happens.
3 kids, it happens. 3 kids didn't come back. Right? If you're an EMT and you get caught on camera eating a sandwich over somebody dying of a heart attack, you ain't working again. Right? So
if you're a police officer and you suffocate a dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're done. You're done. So, some of this is accountability, but one thing Toure mentioned this at the beginning about like how we're feeling.
Yeah.
I can tell you it's all of it's exhausting, all of it's upsetting. You have your up days, your down days, because it's the pandemic in general.
Yeah.
I felt something Sunday to Monday that I had never felt before. Sometimes you want to disconnect. You turn off the TV, you put on Insecure or whatever. You do what you got to do. But because of the protests going on, I found that even in my house, because I didn't go to protests. I went to Baltimore on Monday. Even in my house, all throughout Sunday, I was like Oracle. I was the central point. I had students all over the country who were protesting. I had friends reaching out to me. We need a cop in Detroit. A kid got thrown in jail. Such and such got their leg broken. Where do I get this equipment? Like I spent most of Sunday as like a connection point between friends of mine all over the country who were involved. I just Venmoed $500 to a student of mine who wasn't even in a protest in LA. She and her cousin were just handing water to protesters, got arrested. She got separated from her 14-year-old cousin, thrown in jail. They impounded her and her car. Told her, find your own way home, find your cousin and find your own way home. Like, even I've never been at a time where even when you're in your own space, you're in the midst of all of this. And that's why it's been a different kind of feeling for me. There's not been a day, I don't care what I'm doing in the house, there's not been a day that I haven't felt connected in a very personal way. Even if I'm not out there for duty, even if I'm not out there writing, that I haven't felt connected to everything that's going on. And that's before I set foot on Baltimore streets.
But going back to what you were talking about a second ago, Jeff, about how a conviction is the bare minimum, and there's so much more wholesale work and overhauling of this individual system, the criminal justice system. Well, there's police brutality, there's a criminal justice system. Okay, so it's like we're talking about one issue, we're talking about one corner of one room of a dirty ass house. Okay, but that police brutality is one section of a dirty bathroom in a huge house that the foundation of which is white supremacy and institutional racism, systemic racism, right? The thing going back, like, again, this is why I said earlier that I'm struggling, like, it depends on when you ask, and I know I might be, falling for this okie doke of watching this amazing coalition that's taken to the streets, is like, when people say, do they know what they're saying? Do they know what they're writing on their signs when they say, racism must end? Do they know what, like, okay, it's time to overhaul, because it's like, wait a minute, do you know what that means? Like, do you know that literally this entire country and everything has been built on, and all the advantages you have, and everything you think you accomplished because you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, has to come tumbling down? Because if we're going to achieve equity, that means that something got to come down and something else to go up. And so I'm like, I don't know that white folks is really about that life of leaning into what it would take to actually undo 400 years of this shit, 500 years of this shit. Like, it's not something that's gonna be done in a week. And to your point, Jeff, it's not gonna be something that's done with a conviction.
One thing that kills me is the call to see cops kneeling.
Oh, Jesus.
It drives me fucking insane.
Could Colin Kaepernick trademark that? Like, he should at least be getting some kind of like.
Well, first of all,
I mean, if somebody can trademark T-bowing, then you should be able to trademark taking a knee.
Why would we want to see cops take a knee at a protest against a murder where the cop kneeled on his neck? Like, that is exactly the opposite symbol that any of us would ever want to see.
That's that whole element of, if Jesus comes back, the last thing he wants to see is a cross, right?
Exactly.
Like, really think about it.
Exactly.
But it's part of this sort of performative violence that white people participate in that makes them feel good. There's a great article on the Washington Post written by one of my colleagues at Morgan State, Stacey Patton, and she's like, look, in the 1920s, if white people were protesting against racism and conducted, mock hangings and mock lynchings, would we think it was okay? No, because you're just play acting. You're just performing. And actually, it speaks to the idea that pretend white death still elicits more empathy from white people than actual black death. That 100 white people laying down for 9 minutes with their necks to the side still gets more politicians to get, misty-eyed than the actual video of a black man being killed. So yeah, all this, you can miss me with this stuff with the cops kneeling and hugging people. I never liked that kind of nonsense. Those cops can make me much happier if they walked out to the protesters and said, here, Corello, Jenkins, Anderson, blah, blah, blah. These are the dirty cops in our precinct.
No, but it's not about the dirty cops in the precinct, right? Like, you know what it is. It's about the way that we police policing. It's about the contract that we have with police, that we allow them to chokehold, that we don't make them retreat when possible, that we don't make them intervene when they see other cops doing the wrong thing. And if we change the structure, the governing structure of policing, then we will have better outcomes. It's not about he's a bad guy, but he's a good guy. I think some of us, if we wore the badge for 10 years, would get into some situations where it's like, damn, I don't even recognize myself, but I come home every day, I'm stressed as hell, dealing with people in their worst moment over and over and over. I submit it's a terrible job. It's a very difficult job. So we need to give them more structure in how to do the job, not thinking like, well, if we can't just get rid of the bad guy. Now there's actual white supremacists on the job, and we're not going to be able to reform them. But if we structure the way they do the job better, then we'll get better outcomes.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No nuance there. No.
I mean, listen.
Jeff is going to be the hardest professor ever. It's like, all fail.
So I think that over the last 50 years in particular, we have seen all of the reforms in policing have come by way of policy, training, and technology. And so you've changed policies, you've changed guidelines, you've changed rules, you've changed training, you've changed technology. It hasn't changed policing. you haven't changed the reason cops get in the car. And so the reform has to fundamentally be a disruptive change in why police officers exist. Because if we don't change the reason why policing exists, then you still have the same culture that exists with new technology, new training, and new guidelines. And even to your point, Toure, even conscientious men and women who are in the job long enough get acculturated to this culture of why I get in the car in the first place. Mm-hmm. And when you've got police unions that block all kinds of issues around residency and the ability to have neighbor police officers, and we haven't changed the policy around what it takes to even get into the academy. So brothers and sisters who would actually be ripe to police communities they come from can't even qualify for the academy. If we're not changing why they get in the police car and what police exists for, all of the technology and training and policy will not impact an overall difference in the outcome.
That's what I was saying earlier about in the grand scheme of things. It's like we could address and protest and attack the issue of police brutality, which is literally the tip of the iceberg, which is literally the result of the root cause that is racism. The extreme manifestation of racism and white supremacy in America is police brutality. So along those lines, you're right. It's like we can't reverse engineer this thing. Like we got to start from the core. And so like start from the core of why are there police? What is their purpose? And who's called to serve that purpose?
I got to be honest, when this is something I had sort of been toying with, like intellectually for a while, but the last week has sort of solidified it. And I admit in all humility, hey, it's the purpose of growth. I am moving closer to certain theoretical aspects of the abolish the police movement. I am. Yeah. We got to have something completely different. Yeah. And what Jeff said, like, I wasn't there 2 months ago, but I was getting there. And then I've seen this, and I've seen all these well-meaning, newly elected district attorneys, state prosecutors. And I'm like, we already know how this is going to end. We already know that most of these people are not going to be able to catch these folks. We already know, as Jeff said, that a lot of these cops are going to get rehired. They're not going to be able to grab them all. It took, Keith Ellison stepping in to even turn Chauvin's, case into second-degree murder. There's someone dynamic in this country, and I guess we could talk about it. Some mayor, some city, some dynamic person is going to have to say, we're just not going to. We're going to create something else. We're going to call them community peacekeepers, watchmen.
Great show.
Excellent show.
Excellent show.
Listen, any show whose initial episode starts with fucking Black Wall Street getting bombed.
Right.
I'm like,
yeah.
I was confused about what I was watching. I'm sorry, Jace. It just proceed. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I thought you were going somewhere else. Any show that has Regina King in the black leather beating up the racist and throwing him in the trunk of a car.
What I'm saying is I've never seen a black movie show the bombing of Tulsa.
Yes.
Let alone a Marvel-driven strip on HBO.
Right.
That opens up
Yeah.
with Black people being killed in an actual murder.
Yeah. Do you know that was a lot of people's first exposure to that? A lot of people learned about the massacre from that episode.
Yes.
And I'll say this, as somebody who, Nerd Credit is actually DC, not Marvel. Sorry, I had to say that.
I'm sorry. No, listen. That's blasphemous. So thank you. For too many people, that was their first time hearing about it. And look, I didn't like the original Watchmen because the guy who wrote it is a crazy right-winger, if you see a lot of his other work. I had some issues with the series. But for that opening alone, I was like, well, thank goodness. Because it started discussions. I mean, again, we what was it, Sunday? Sunday is a 100-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Of what just happened. And to think that there are millions of Americans who would have had no idea about that day if it weren't for a show on HBO.
Michael,
and a lot of people still missed it as theatrics.
Right. Michael, if we're having a shift in how we look at police brutality, and a lot of white people saying like, damn, can y'all just protest like nicely and peacefully? Shouldn't that end with Kaepernick getting his job back?
Bruh, like it's that, and that's again, my opening, it's open. Not only am I falling from the banana in the tailpipe, I'm putting the banana in my own tailpipe. I'm Eddie Murphy around this motherfucker.
That sounds like some whole other thing.
Yeah, like you know, there's some bullshit you think. You know they ain't really about this wholesale change, like because it's like, bro, it's like the amount of, it's so. Let's just like not just the NFL. Thank you, Toure, for that TL. Not just the NFL, which obviously they have zero credibility on this matter. I don't care what rappers they bring to the kids table in their owner's room. They have zero credibility on the matter of social justice. Fuck ride-alongs and PSAs during the Super Bowl. But it's not just them, man. It's like across the board, these corporations and these statements. It's good business practice right now to say Black Lives Matter. It's not controversial. The controversy is to not say anything. Right. It's like they're like again, not only keep that same energy, but where was this energy? I'm old enough to remember a certain network, okay, saying that we need to stick to sports. Okay? I'm old enough to remember living through that, literally being made an example of. Okay? And then now it's like we all in this together. We're committed to this, that, and the other. And it's like, let's all lean in and have all these conversations. Like, where was all this? And it makes you wonder, like, is there a sincere level of true commitment to not just riding this cultural wave and being a part of this moment, but actually committing to this work, even when this work is not leading the news every night? Like, I can't take credit for this, but don't, you should, many people have said this, don't have more Black Lives Matter posts than you have Black executives, or Black employees at your company. And so it's like, whether it's the NFL, across the board, I look at all these people sideways, I'm like, oh, okay, so you are now committed to this when 4 years ago you ain't had shit to say, or last year you ain't had shit to say. Hell, last week you ain't had shit to say.
Michael, I got to tell you, I know the pandemic has shut a lot of stuff down. Who needs live sports? Because I've been enjoying the linguistic gymnastics and backflips of so many analysts that I have seen turn back on what we all heard they were saying up until last week about Colin Kaepernick, about these issues, not just in sports, but in news and popular culture. The very same people, Black people, oftentimes Black men who are poo-pooing, who are towing the line, who are like, well, if they could just protest a little nicer, if they just wouldn't go to the coffee shop. And now, they're jumping in saying this is about rights and justice and whatever else. And look, everybody got a different role to play, but some of these people, I don't want to hear their nonsense because they don't believe in it. They're only doing it because they were always on the wrong side of history, and now they just don't want to be run over by it.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what is encouraging, though. Again, and okay, let me go back to why this is different. You got people like Malcolm Jenkins telling Drew Brees to shut the fuck up. Like, that is. I mean, bruh, like, I don't know that would have happened before. Like, you was just like, hey, Hall of Fame quarterback on my team, you got to shut the fuck up right about now. I was like, damn, okay. We out here for real.
We were noting before we started that this moment is different in that we're all getting white people checking in on us. How you doing? How you feeling? Let me send you a virtual hug. Da 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 da.
What can I do?
That didn't happen during Trayvon and Eric Garner and all the other traumatic moments that came before this one.
Wait, quick question. Y'all ain't hit him with the Malcolm X, did you? What can I do to help your cause? Nothing. You hit him with the Denzel Washington. Nothing.
I hit him with the M'Baku.
Just bark at him. Just woof at him.
I just don't have anything to say to you at all.
Are you tired of that? I know you're sick of that, Jeff.
I don't really have any white friends, so that doesn't, none of them are reaching out to me. So
I'm so there. Okay, I know people think this is mean to say, right?
No,
but quite literally, I don't.
I'll get that on a T-shirt for you, Jeff. I'll get that on a T-shirt for you.
Real talk. I had a neighbor text my wife yesterday, and I was moved slightly by the discomfort in them attempting to find words to make themselves feel better about what was happening. Mm-hmm. And as my wife and I have navigated living in a community that is predominantly white, the question that we've had and that we've even debated is, what role are we going to play in white people's education?
Right.
And so there, and I think a lot of Black people have been thinking about this. I refuse to create the space for them not to have to be courageous. I am remaining available for the courageous spaces they're willing to create.
Oh, see,
but I'm not.
I've
doing it the other way.
I've learned to go, I think, further than that. And that as Gen Xer, when I was growing up, we were supposed to argue with these people and teach them that was expected of us. Right. And one thing I've learned from the millennials, that they're like,
Can't hear you.
Okay, I thought I was
Can't
like,
hear you, Toure.
I was like, I gotta charge my AirPods. I thought that was me.
The spirit of white supremacy went into your mic.
You were getting too fired.
And he got the old headphones on too. Like you got the wire joint in. Bro, you didn't drop. Hey, Toure, you out here fucking up the church's money right now.
Dude, man, what's up?
You didn't dropped off once.
I think I was my fucking headphones. No, I love the millennials have taught me to talk about, I'm not going to do the effort to teach you. I'm not going to do your homework for you. I'm not here to educate you. You figure it out yourself. And when I first heard that ethos, I was like, wow, is that right? And then I was like, is that possible? And I thought about the work and the emotional effort it takes for me to educate you. And what does that do for me? That doesn't do shit for me. And quite often you walk away not learning anything, and I walk away emotionally exhausted. And I'm like, fuck that. I love that about the millennials. I totally adopted that. I'm not here to teach you shit.
The first time I remember this, and everybody here is old enough to remember, it reminds me in part of being in school when the OJ ruling came out. And every white friend you had on campus would call you or try and go on lunch with you and be like, you think he's guilty, right? Like they needed to hear. I'm sorry?
I wasn't in school, youngin.
Okay. I was in school, and they, that's what they would come to. They had to hear some black person. And even at that age, I was like, I'm not going to give that to you. I was like, well, I guess they said he was not guilty, so there you go. I wouldn't give them that space. And what I find now that's happening, I've been reached out to by white students of mine who are often usually just saying thank you. Like they're writing me and saying, I would not have been able to even comprehend this had you not been my professor. And that, that tends to make me feel decent. But I don't have a lot of white people in my life who have called me. One of my closest friends called me and said, I'm sorry. And we laughed because that's the exact same thing he said to me after the Zimmerman ruling. But he's a very sort of politically aware, politically active white guy from the South. But I don't have a lot of people, seeking my guidance, seeking my absolution, and I wouldn't have it to give. I ain't got that.
Yeah, I've had a lot of I'm here for you, and let me know if you want to talk type shit, but not help me understand. And there's just too much information available, and that's been available to where if you don't know, which goes back to like, again, as graphic, Jeff, and you laid it out earlier about how slow and just intentional it was. Exactly. Just how much he suffered. It was more graphic than even we were accustomed to, and that's saying a lot, right? But that's why it's like, wait a minute, like this is this, not only have we been trying to tell you this, it's been well documented. It's been available.
Yeah.
Like, it's been written about, showed on video, movies, documentaries, 13th, and When They See Us, and if you want to know, you've had every opportunity to know what it is and understand what it is, which, going back to Drew Brees, talked about it earlier, like, people are like, wait, is Drew ignorant? Does he still not get it? No, he knows it's not about the flag. But no matter what, and this is where I go back on my hopefulness and go back to reality, is just like, will we ever get to a point where they can truly put themselves in our shoes, even for a second, even imagine themselves in our shoes?
No, they
because
can't.
Drew Brees,
And
is
they can't.
capable of saying,
And
I look at the flag.
No.
Drew Brees says, I look at the flag this way. That's how you should look at the flag. Damn what you go through. This is how we should all look at the flag. Like, why can't you acknowledge that that's not your experience? Because he doesn't want to acknowledge that. He doesn't want to.
I'm just giving white people my Cash App. Like, listen, that's how you really feel. Like, put 5 on it.
Reparations. Look, wait.
Ooh.
Fuck
A
that.
collection plate. Reparations collection plate.
I put out a tweet earlier this week. I had a friend of mine call me in the morning, an older sister, and she said that so she had been seeing a therapist. She was going through a divorce. She'd been seeing a therapist for 2 years. White guy. Talk about that later. But she'd been seeing a therapist for 2 years, and he called her and actually asked her if he could talk to her about all these racial events that are going on.
Her therapist?
Mm-hmm.
In the country. Her therapist.
Ooh.
And she was
charge?
like,
first of all, did she charge?
Right. I was like, I told her, I said, well, first off, that's kind of what you get. But she's like, I canceled my next appointment and I'm never going to go see him again. And I tweeted about that. And like 20,000 people were like, this is, blah, blah, blah therapy. But what it speaks to is, besides the institutional issues at play about healthcare for Black people, it's that other issue of like, that ain't your job. And a lot of people were tweeting back and they were like, yo, I'll answer your question for $500 and a refund for the last 2 years, because clearly you didn't know a damn thing.
But wait a minute. Fuck them. I want to talk about us for a second, because this is probably the 20th video like this that I could call up in my short-term memory at any second. I'm sure I could name off 20 names that all you'd be like, yep, I can see Walter Scott in my head. I can see Tamir Rice in my head. I can see John Crawford in my head. Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, on and on and on.
Yep.
What is it doing to us that we have all these Black snuff films in our heads all the fucking time?
What does it do to us?
Yeah.
No, I mean, the reality is that Black people are already walking around with compounded trauma. So we've had that if we didn't know those names. And even when you talk about the behavioral health space, most clinicians are trained to only be able to treat one trauma at a time. And there's something really interesting, as we're just coming out of Mental Health Awareness Month, that the entire behavioral health industry has attempted to teach coping mechanisms versus thriving mechanisms. And so unless you have therapy that is driven by a level of cultural intentionality for a not only therapy approach, but even a wellness and self-mastery approach that's not about how do I cope with the shit that's happening to me. It's how am I disruptive? So this whole notion of rebellion is not just manifesting itself in a geopolitical sense, but there's a real opportunity to embrace that into the core of our DNA, that everything that we have accepted as a mechanism of survival now has to become systematically for us to be able to thrive. And if we don't get that in this moment, then we're going to punk the fuck out and find ourselves in places that we actually are calling for reforms that are nothing more than shifts. And that would be a travesty.
Jason, what do you think about that? All these videos you got in your head.
I agree with Jeff, and not just from the mental health aspect, but also we can't just sort of shift the feeling and the burden to fix this and fix that. I can say from a personal level, it is terrifying. And there is a level of fear, you know, it's like Coates wrote about, like there's a fear I have for my body and my bodily integrity that has been with me probably my entire life, but has really been heightened since I was in Ferguson and all these other things I've seen. And I probably, like everybody here, I have had family members who have been abused, shot, killed by police. But the fact that it's not just this pantheon of names, but these are now people that I know. I mean, you know, Clementa Pinckney was a friend of mine. I had known Clem for 20 years. And he was the pastor at Mother Emanuel. Like, and Jonathan Farrell, if you guys remember, the guy who survived a car accident, walks 2 miles, and then gets shot by the cops.
Yeah.
That's the cousin of one of my best friends. And I didn't even know that was his cousin until like we were talking 2 weeks ago. And so like I've known for years, and he's like, I'm tired of people killing my family. He's like, you know, like I was like, wait, that's your cousin? He's like, yes. I covered that on the news and didn't realize that that's the cousin of a friend of mine. So these names aren't, they're all of our families, but like the names are now very personal to me. They kind of float around in my head. And I'd be lying if I said I entirely grasp what that does to me or how that affects me. I just know they're there.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it's already there, Jeff. I remember, I mean, like, you know, I went to the lynching postcard exhibit, right, when that was going around, right? And like you felt like you'd already been there, right? And this is that in motion. And I mean, it just updates the trauma. I mean, I am definitely overwhelmed from that. And like, not necessarily always wanting to look at the new video because I don't know if I could take it. It's worse than a horror movie. I haven't, to be truthful, I have not watched the George Floyd video to the end.
Me neither.
Because I get to a certain point and I can't take it anymore and I stop watching. And this is the first one that I haven't. But I mean, I know there's BLM people who are like, I don't watch them anymore because you don't need to tell me anything more. I've seen them. I mean, like seeing all these, it's a huge psychological weight. The trauma of Blackness sort of like weighing down on you in a very tangible way, like, you know, beyond the epigenetics, but like this is what's happening right now.
But I mean, it's coded in our DNA. The scars of trauma. It's a part of it. We come into the world with this, and these are just triggers, constant triggers. And it's like I just think about it like, you know, I keep going back to this idea of like this is literally just the tip, right, of the iceberg. And it's like, you know, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We on life. We ain't even got to true liberty and pursuit of happiness. We just on life out this moment.
We on lie.
You know, the very beginning, right? And so, but just I think about my children, and I think about, you know, talking to them and educating them and informing them. I grew up in New Orleans, and I wasn't around white people until I got to college. You know, I was like Jeff is now. I didn't have no white friends. And I was just like, you know, I don't remember that talk. I don't remember when I became aware of what this country was and how it treated us. Even before I knew history, I knew survival mechanisms. I knew that the police were not to be trusted. I knew that white people, for the most part, were not to be trusted to do anything other than be white. And it was like, and that's what was cool. I was programmed to think that way at a young age. And what that does, it robs you of your innocence. And there's a lot of conversations going on about how to talk to your kids. I think it's really important. And I think every family and every kid is obviously different. You know, I think it's really important to protect our children's innocence as much as we can while simultaneously protecting them from society. We can't pull the wool over their eyes. But what I've always struggled with is like having a 7-year-old daughter. Do I introduce it, or even like just talk about, we know the saying is, in America, a black man is a boy and a black boy is a man. It's like, do I need to contribute and help bring my child into manhood and adulthood and have him walking around past the same pain I carry that I'm just used to carrying now, and that my parents were used to carrying. But same as they pass down hate, we pass down pain. And like, do I just give him that at an early age?
No. The answer is no.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hear, like, I don't have any kids, and this is always fascinating.
I got a
what
lot
do y'all do?
How many kids you got, Joe?
I got a lot.
How many you got, Joe?
How many kids you got? A lot.
I'm a crib to college father. I have 21, 18, 17, 3, and 1.
Crib to college father.
21, 18, 17, 3, and 1.
Yes.
Ooh, that's awesome.
But you say no.
I think that's my ATM number, actually.
That's a lot of
So I think it's interesting you say no, because I struggle with how much and when do they need to know. You need to be on edge out here. You need to be watching. You need to have your head on a swivel. Like, at what point is not telling them what's really game out here dangerous for them? And my kids are young.
But there's a difference between preparing your child and passing on your shit. So preparing your child is tactical as much as it is historical. It's not emotional. And so we often miss that, and we are passing on and imprinting on our kids the emotion of our trauma, as opposed to the tactical and the tactics of survival and the historical context. So I'm having conversation. I had a conversation with my kids the other day. I'm like, do y'all really understand the difference between white supremacy and white people? And
that is with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, right? No, I'm joking.
Stop playing.
Look, literally teaches, and I want you to understand.
If you go to my IG right now, the word for the day yesterday for my 1-year-old was rebel, and so and for my 3-year-old, it was the definition of rebel. Right. But it wasn't through the lens of watch the news right now and let me show you what this means. It is no. My 1-year-old is literally running around the house slamming doors like rebel, rebel, rebel. And it was hilarious. And it was comic relief. My 3-year-old, I'm like, I want to teach you what the definition of the word rebel means. And so, but I'm doing that not through, let me have you watch the news and let you understand that right now there's a rebellion taking place in cities all over the country, and it's related to this murder of this one brother on the tail end of the murder of this sister and this other brother in this broader context of this geopolitical white supremacy. No.
Yeah.
This is what the fuck rebel means.
Right.
And I want you to understand that that is connected to anything, both internal and external, that is blocking you from what you've been called to do. Now, with my 17-year-old and my 18-year-old, it's a different conversation. It is, y'all little privileged motherfuckers have to understand that your father has done an awful job of providing you with the true nuances. And I think it's more the heightened understanding that the post-COVID world that they're walking into is different than the pre-COVID world that they thought they were going to be navigating. And that, coupled with this moment of rebellion, uprising, however you want to define it, is requiring me to have some different conversations with them than even the ones that I had previously had. And so it is really about, I need you to understand the systemic realities so you don't get caught up in the personalities. And I don't want you to get caught in the personalities, because you will get lost in that and lose the understanding of how the system impacts not just white people. Because to me, counterculture is a reflection of white supremacy. I mean, cancel culture is a reflection of white supremacy. But we don't talk about it that way.
What do you mean?
And you said, what do I mean?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is, anytime a black person believes that a disagreement ideologically with another black person, even to the extent of believing that what that black person has done is counter to what is in the best interest of black people, believes that they can rob them of their blackness, when the entire world is trying to rob you of your blackness and
or
kill
define
you,
that blackness.
fucking white supremacy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the idea of cancel, I want to add to what Jeff's saying, and the idea of cancel culture is baked into that, is that you were a full respected voice within culture to begin with. And almost no black people have been in a position of being so well ensconced in the culture that cancellation is something, it just, yeah, you're 100% right. 100% right.